Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Gen and I'm the chair of MIT Enterprise Forum New York. We're a nonprofit organization based in New York, hosted by a lot of MIT alumni and industry professionals, and we organize monthly and now weekly thought leadership events. Today we're really excited to host this panel on AR and VR and mainstream adoption. Thank you, Cindy and the VR AR Association for being a great partner. And with that, let me just duck out here and pass over to Cindy.
Yeah, hey everyone. So I'm Cindy Mallory. I'm the Emerging Tech Strategist for Worldwide Tech Services, and I'm really excited to be moderating today's panel. We're going to be discussing AR, VR mainstream adoption and what Microsoft and Mesh mean for the future of VR and AR. I'm looking forward to a great conversation on social interaction as real and virtual blend. Microsoft Mesh is a collaboration and communications tool. It's a platform that Engadget described as Microsoft's ambitious new attempt at unifying holographic virtual collaboration across multiple devices, be they VR headsets, AR, laptops, or smartphones. Our keystone point of reference will feature public advancements accelerating the space made by Microsoft in the competitive ecosystem. We'll be covering everything from virtual meetings to corporate learning and large-scale onboarding to patents and contracts shaping the future. So let's meet our panelists. Let's start with you, Yulia.
Hello, everyone. Yulia Barnikova here. I'm a principal at Heidrick & Struggles, focusing on digital and innovation, and I help leaders really embrace and innovate with emerging technology. And I'm a big fan of mixed reality, a big user of it as well. And I'm also in the Microsoft MVP program, where we do some collaboration with the Microsoft team on products and kind of shaping the future of what they do. And I was, fun fact, co-moderating the Ignite session when they announced Microsoft Mesh. So I kind of got an on-the-ground view of how they were working through it. And thankfully, there were no trolls that I came across because everyone was just so in awe of the announcement. So looking forward to working with everyone today and discussing more.
That's great. Michael, could you introduce yourself?
Hi. I'm Michael Owen, and I'm a principal at Media Combo. We're a digital creative studio based in Brooklyn, New York, and we produce a lot of interpretive content for institutions such as museums. And in the last 5 years, we've become very focused into immersive technologies for carrying out those sort of missions. And in particular, we're now very interested in using social immersive platforms for education about critical thinking, visual literacy, social emotional skills, and also in a separate but parallel vein about environmental education and bringing people together over great distances in social. I'm thinking about international collaborations between students of a high school or university age to discuss topics of common relevance to them. And especially that's taking off now because of what's happened with travel restrictions.
Very good. Eduardo, hello.
I'm Eduardo Nieder. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Factual VR. We are a mixed reality platform to enable remote collaboration between frontline workers and experts. We allow experts to be teleported to the worksite through an avatar that is rendered in augmented reality, and we recreate a digital twin of the worksite in virtual reality at the expert's office. Make the two areas correspond, and we create a shared space through that. We receive a grant for the Department of Energy, an SBIR grant, phase 1 and phase 2. We have been working with the electric utility in the Mid-Atlantic to provide use cases and expertise on actually how to use this technology in the field. And in addition to that, we recently entered the defense space, and we signed a CRADA, a collaborative agreement with the Navy to support them in the remote maintenance of aircraft.
Thank you. And last but not least, Kevin.
Great, great to be here. Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Mulcahy. I'm the co-author of a book, The Future Workplace Experience, and I curate conversations specifically with the HR community on helping the HR community prepare for the introduction of new technologies into the workplace that are modifying and transforming how we work, how we learn, how we earn. And in the past, I've put together a number of conversations and experiences with helping HR understand AI. And along comes that just as HR were beginning to master AI, now comes another two-letter acronym, VR, and then there's XR, and then there's AR. So that's what I'm trying to do here is how do we help the HR community anticipate and prepare for incorporating VR into their workflows to upgrade, reskill, new skill employees.
Thank you. That's great. And that leads us right into the beginning. I think it's important for us to actually define what exactly is a virtual reality enabled meeting. Yulia, if you want to start us off.
Sure. So when we work with business leaders across different industries, one of the biggest pain points with so many is kind of how do we get more connected, closer to each other? How do we move beyond kind of video conferencing, Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, all that stuff, and really start to get back some of those connections, particularly that were lost in the kind of the global lockdowns within the pandemic. And so what VR meetings allow you to do, or what they are, is you can put on a headset and then you can be kind of like with avatars around you. So it's, if you think of almost like Second Life or The Sims, you're in a world that is immersive. You see, at the Ignite conference, we were underwater and we were swimming around with fish, seeing each other, sitting there in an auditorium, and we could kind of choose a fish and it would spring up into existence. So the idea is you're having kind of a meeting like we're doing here, but it's completely around you and you can do pretty much anything in it. And what's really interesting there is that the sense of presence, the sense of connection is much stronger because, when you take your headset off, you feel like you were there. A lot of us, we tend to say, we have to almost do a re-entry process into the real world because it does feel like you just literally get teleported back. So that's kind of the essence of what that kind of a meeting looks like. And what's interesting too is it doesn't have to be in a VR headset necessarily or a HoloLens, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It could be on a computer as well. So a lot of these platforms, including the Microsoft Mesh and others, they allow you to join through a computer as well. So that makes the environment much more inclusive for pretty much all devices.
Yeah. So I guess my next question would be, so we threw a lot of acronyms, VR, AR, MR. So how is a VR enabled meeting different than augmented reality? And then how is that different than a mixed reality meeting?
Sure. So in a virtual reality meeting, if you're putting on a headset, then the entire world is blocked off. So you're seeing the entire world changes for you, and you're seeing all of your colleagues or teammates or students in that environment with you. For an augmented reality meeting, you're basically seeing the real world in front of you, and the people who you're meeting with, they beam in as avatars. So you can take a real life wall and you could stick some sticky notes on top of it, and then an avatar of your colleague can join you, and you can both be kind of doing sticky notes on the same wall in the place that you are. So it kind of that's kind of what we define as augmented reality, because you can see the real world in front of you. And then in the mixed reality world, which is a term that Microsoft uses in particular, and especially something that Mesh enables, you can now get a mixture of these different devices going. So some people could be in a VR headset. They can kind of have the whole world, occluded around them. Some people can be in an office. They can be beaming in people through, their avatars into the real world. And some people could be joining on a screen, kind of like a Zoom or a Teams screen. And that way it's really a mixture across the spectrum of video plus the avatars, or some people call it holograms. And even with volumetric video capture, where you can actually scan people in, you can even see videos, you can see actual projections of people that are pre-recorded. And that's actually something that, if you saw the Mesh announcement, Alex Kipman had a pre-recorded version of himself in virtual reality that we could all, walk around him and, see him as if he were standing right there. And that is really the future. And that's why Microsoft Mesh is so powerful, is because it creates this new ecosystem that we can all build upon. And, I like to say that in this kind of a space, every pixel or voxel is kind of a canvas for creativity. You can put anything you want in this new world. And that has so many implications for collaboration, presentations, and learning, as we'll talk about. So absolutely, definitely lots to unpack here.
Yeah, so my next thing is, what does it mean exactly to see a player like Microsoft step in and make a collaboration platform that's meant for mainstream adoption? What does that implicate?
So what's interesting about Microsoft is they have this platform called AltSpace VR. So if anybody has tried it out, it's something that actually, if you haven't tried it out, you can go there right now. It's AltSpace VR. Take a look. You can set up a free account, and they have this platform where you can go in and you can go in as avatars. And then you also have the ability to project slides. You can bring in 3D models into the space. So, and it's all for free, at least right now. So it's very easy to try. And what's great about Microsoft starting to invest in this area even more with Mesh is that as the cost of headsets starts to go down, and we're hearing rumors about the HoloLens for consumers, all of that is going to become one big ecosystem where eventually we can start to bring in, our office documents, pop them in, and have this, an unlimited, these unlimited monitors in front of us. And then we can bring in our colleagues as avatars and collaborate, pretty much anywhere that we want. And that's really what's exciting, is that we're moving in that direction. And this, Mesh and AltSpace and Office integration is a really big part of that.
Yeah, all right. This is for anyone. What are examples of events or meetings that currently meet in mixed reality?
So I can offer a few. I actually was part of one of the first all VR conferences last year with educators in VR, where they had, I think it was thousands of people in the AltSpace platform. And since then, we've had the Global HR Summit, and even Burning Man was conducted in AltSpace. So, people from all walks of life are starting to realize this is a much more interesting way to meet than a video call. So that's just one example or two examples.
And it doesn't have to be all work. I was at the Sundance Film Festival in January, and they built their own VR environment for the filmmakers. So whenever you get artists exploring with the intersection of art and technology, you really get some interesting manifestations of what is possible from the technology. And they had some features in that platform that when you mesh, you have your avatar, but the picture of your face was a camera that just captured your face. So I had all of my real face, but I was on a little avatar body. And so that was an interesting test of, it's not avatar or real like Zoom, there are hybrids. And so that the second thing that happened there, they had panels, they had interactions. It changes how people interact. And what each of us needs to think about is, how can we affect the interaction for the better? It's not just because we can do it this way. It's thinking carefully about the technology to go, what types of interactions will enhance the interactions between people? And that's the appropriate use of the technology, and not just because it's new. That would be my view on that.
I think it's, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if we think about the kind of meetings that can happen in VR, is the use cases are just starting to appear, right? Are consumers and employees, right, in the consumer or enterprise side, start getting more familiar with the technologies, getting mainstream. Use cases are going to grow. We talk, just about non-work related. I guess before the call, we're talking about a comedy show, right, in VR. And we talk about people watching sports together in VR. So the human communication and interaction that happen in the medium is really powerful. I guess the use cases are starting to appear.
I think this, and what Kevin mentioned though is the sort of slightly parallel ways this has worked. The idea of marrying an avatar to an image is very cool, but that is like a PC engagement. When you have your headset on, you can't do that. The closest you're going to get is where HP is going, and I think even Oculus later this year will be measuring your face and your eyes and being able to more accurately project on your avatar what you're feeling and your body language, or at least your facial language, which is a very important part of your body language. So that's exciting. But the real thing about being in a headset is that sense of presence that Yulia, I mean, I was just showing a VR space that I've been working in to a friend who wasn't that familiar with a headset. So I put it on, got her to get to this, it was a frame VR space. She was there. Then I left her to go somewhere where we would not be contaminating the audio, put on, did our thing. And then when I came back, I took it off and she says, well, and I walked away, where were you? I thought you were here the entire time. So she really felt that she was in the same space as me, even though I'd made a strict point of being separated. And that separation could be thousands of miles. But the point is the feeling was one of being really close together, of closing any distance and time. And that is absolutely the power of this medium.
Michael, are you suggesting that the sense of proximity is better than a Zoom call?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Frame VR. That's actually one of my favorite platforms beyond AltSpace to use to kind of demo the power of what you can do in a virtual space. And I can put that into the chat, but it's framevr.io, and you can go there and you can set up a free account. It's in public beta right now, and it's very easy to use. You can start kind of putting things up on walls. I was just working with a friend who does photography, and we made it was like 15 minutes. We made a really quick photo gallery for her where we kind of pasted everything on the walls. We made a link, and then we invited a lot of people to it, and everyone was in, as little avatars walking around. They said, wow, this is so, it's very different than what we typically see. And of course, it's not, it's not the same as seeing it all in person, but especially in today's world, it was remarkable what we were able to do in that platform in so little time.
Well, it goes back to what's the purpose of meeting, and one of the big purposes of meeting in a corporate environment is to review workflows, and you can't review workflows on Zoom, but in VR you can, and you just described to be able to walk around and interface with displays or with objects is part of working with a workflow. Or the second part is decision making. And if the technology, if a VR environment helps people be more present and make better decisions, then it's a great outcome. Another one is, in a sense, enhancing some capabilities that we couldn't have, information available at our fingertips in a digital meeting or a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting. There's extra information and we can really bring to the decision very efficiently in VR. So I think for me, it's always looking at where is VR adding to the decision-making or the workflow or the capability enhancing experience. And those are good use cases for it versus stressing people out on using them for use cases where there's a tax or a burden on putting on the rig or the device and taking the time to get set up into the immersive environment in the first place. But I'm a huge fan. And I think what Michael said, we're just beginning to go, what are the best use cases for, in my case, having meetings and interactions between employees be more productive. And Microsoft is showing us a direction in how to do that.
If I were to add to that point, the points you mentioned are pretty important. Let me just elaborate on the knowledge sharing, right? Knowledge capturing, knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer. And as an enterprise, people and the ability for them, the knowledge they have is one of the main assets. Is there are elements where VR is very well suited to help with that knowledge transfer, the knowledge acquisition, especially anything that has to do with 3D space, physical interaction, muscle memory, right? Brain is naturally developed to think in 3D. If we're talking about activities that are 3D activities, beyond having a two-dimensional screen in front of us, is actually physically grab with objects, interact with objects, see the physical reactions. I can throw it, it falls. The action and reaction ability that gets registered. The learning capabilities of the brain when we immerse in that environment is significantly superior than any other means. So knowledge retention, knowledge transfer is significant value for the enterprises. Then when we talk about the knowledge, not only the ability to store it somewhere that they can consume, is the storage can be shared, right? So it's the synchronous knowledge sharing. So that's when the decision making comes to be, right? Is you're really now in real time sharing information from one to another, coming to a conclusion. That ability also facilitates when situational awareness is key. Again, we talk about the sense of presence that VR brings about, or augmented reality. With that comes the notion of situational awareness, right? Is people now have not only the view of FaceTime that has a really, a narrow window into the world, is we can bring all this information that is contextual, that the brain will absorb and process without too much of a cognitive load. It kind of just happens, right? So those are, I would say, main value elements of this technology to enterprise.
Yeah. Go ahead, Cindy.
No, go ahead. You guys are doing great.
No, I was just going to add to Eduardo's comment about just feeling that sense of presence and almost like making memories in VR, because I think it's a very, very powerful aspect of it. So one thing that I always talk about with kind of in the business setting is, even if you're doing kind of an offsite, with your team, just a small meeting that's informal, in a space like AltSpace VR, you can actually, throw snowballs at each other. You can like launch little rockets, like even small things like that are really kind of, it's a little bit silly, but it makes memories. Like you remember that meeting much, much better than kind of a virtual Zoom or Teams happy hour. So that aspect of it is very powerful. And another example that I also thought of in terms of, being able to move 3D models around, which you also mentioned, Eduardo, is I did a presentation once where I was on a stage, kind of like a TED Talk stage, and I hid an elephant behind the stage. And actually in the middle of the presentation, I grabbed it with one hand and I put it right on top of the audience. And I forget what point I was trying to make, but I think it was something around, how you can use 3D models in VR. And people will never forget that. I mean, having an elephant placed on top of their head during a presentation, that like people felt that. People were like, excuse me, there's something on my head right now. They moved around, they walked around the model. And so it's things like that that you can really do that really cement the learning, cement the experience.
And just to add to that, in, let's say, the alt space environment, you can choose different spaces for the different meetings. There are some meetings where you just want a different mood and you want people to stand in a circle and share. There are other meetings where you may want them around in a table or meeting format. And so the ability, not to be underestimated, of picking the right environment for the right meeting versus sometimes what we've done is, and I love that notion, Julia, of just the context in which you have the meeting plays a role in the effectiveness of the meeting outcome. And we sometimes just use the meeting space that's available to us instead of also thinking a little bit more about what is the role of the space in which we hold the meeting. And in a digital virtual world, you have more options to enhance the experience and memory and immersiveness of that meeting, not to be overlooked.
Yeah, in Frame VR, you can actually kind of at the snap of a finger, you can change the entire environment. So just like you change a slide in PowerPoint, you can literally go from like the desert environment to under the sea. You can change all of the 3D models that are in the space, and it's all at the click of a button. So it just kind of goes to show the massive new creative possibilities.
No, absolutely. Frame is great. And I mean, I think though it's the difference between, alt space and mesh is the controls that are now going to be possible in terms of managing who's coming in, who has access, where they can go within the space, having accounts, being able to monetize an experience in a space, which is what Engage has basically got the big lead on now. And in fact, because of HTC's involvement with Now Sync, they're creating their whole business centric parallel to that. So I think it's completely, it's, and Mark is here, I'm sure, able to take with this. I mean, it's the corporate environment that has completely embraced VR more than cultural and education. I mean, there's a real return on investment, which is much harder to, I guess, pinpoint in education and cultural exercises. There's still a thing of like, 15 years ago, a guard would make you put your phone down in a gallery. Don't take pictures, and now they want to boost their Pinterest account. It's like ridiculous. So we've got to get beyond, we're cannibalizing the assets to we're extending these assets to much broader potential audiences.
Thank you, Michael. That's a great segue. Mark, hello. I'm going to ask you a question and have you give a little intro. So what are the implications of MR and VR for the future of work and collaboration, especially on an enterprise scale?
Oh, sure. So my name is Mark Robe. I run the Center of Immersive Technology at UPS. So we've been doing the whole immersive tech, mixed reality stuff for a while now, specifically in training and things like that. So now and also the future, right? The pandemic sort of just kind of accentuated the need for it, but the idea of, the power of being able to sort of virtually meet and learn, it's more apparent than ever. In enterprise specifically, you want to look at it more as, when we talk about training, it's not about knowledge per se. It's more about the ability for an employee to become productive as quick as possible, right? And VR is very effective at that, as well as obviously we're exploring areas in mixed reality where, when you're in the environment versus in virtual reality. So, it's the whole idea of sort of what we call like the 3 basic things you want to get done when you're doing training, right? You want to make sure the new employee is confident in the environment that they're in, right? They're familiar with it, they're comfortable with it, right? 2, they have confidence in the content of the process or whatever it is that they're doing, right? And 3, it's also they are able to be sort of walked through at different sort of pace based on the type of learner, right? So these are very unique things that this type of technology offers that, in the enterprise space, it's becoming more and more apparent that that's where you're going to get your competitive edge with scaling up, upscaling, and descaling employees. So it's an exciting field, and we're really excited about the technology.
Thank you. When it comes to corporate learning, where do you see platforms like Mesh playing a role?
So, products like Mesh, there's other sort of products as well that have been out there, right? The sort of big value piece that we would see is, say, in design, the aspect of being able to collaborate in sort of real time in remote locations, remote sites, saving on things like having to transport someone to a location to collaborate. Those are huge cost savings from the standpoint of return on investment. Also, your ability to execute, right? So it may take 2 days to transition from site to site, right? Technology like Mesh and other similar sorts of pieces out there, right? It gives us the ability to sort of, just turn it on, right? We can just turn on a collaborative session and we're able to work, we're able to get things done. There's technology like Mesh where I can see spatial data in real time as we're working together, and I can annotate that, right? And that this way, that technology sort of can be reintegrated into, say, something like Navisworks. So if you're doing design, right, people can annotate in the virtual space in real time, and that feedback is being passed back, remotely to, say, a drafts person, and they're getting the feedback. So that's kind of, the real sort of exciting part of this is the aspect of sort of immersive collaboration where you're cutting out that time loss between, transitioning from site to site.
I would say, probably the main, the industry that's going to be disrupted the most, but things like Mesh, it would be the travel industry. So, you were right, is the cost savings of having to take a trainer through location to location across the nation, across the world, is the sort of the nightmare story from trainers, people that dedicate, that have accumulated a lot of experience, knowledge in their career, especially people are getting closer to retirement age and whatnot. Is the prospect of having to travel to the locations to train, to teach is a main concern, and reducing that friction, taking that pain out of the equation, not only from the cost of the dollar amount that comes with the travel, but even the ability. Now many people will be able to train from retirement, right? Is they're going to be able to go into the vacation homes or what have you, get into this kind of technology, and flip us a switch. They appear somewhere, and they have all the context that they would need to be able to do that in person. So that ability to remove the friction that comes from distance in terms of training in the corporate environment, it would be I think the main pain that something like Mesh will take out of the equation.
I mean, yes, because a lot of this sort of, even in education, the sessions are synchronous. It's not you're not, as an individual, interacting with a set of information, getting it right or wrong or learning. A lot of times there's a dialogue and a process. So you need the expert or the facilitator. And now one person can remotely do a session in the morning, a session in the afternoon, and a session in the later afternoon 3 places that might be thousands of miles apart, but they're available to interact with people in the context. And so you can have groups of people who are actually meeting physically the same, but in VR, or they don't necessarily have to be in the same place, but you're teaching Chicago in the morning, St. Louis in the afternoon, and Sacramento in the evening. That's entirely possible. That just wasn't before. Once this sort of methodology of doing this kind of immersive instruction is available.
Well, isn't mesh particularly well suited for workflows? Right? 'Cause any of the VR devices could be used for remote training if you're completing a module to do some interactive training on how to replace some parts in a machine, or how to lay out a particular configuration at a hotel room or at a restaurant. Those are training, but you don't need mesh to do that. But what mesh really appears to do is where it's in workflow, where you're in collaboration, where you're jointly creating, where you're interacting with what you're seeing in front of you with others. That to me seemed to be what mesh adds to the space versus what was not there before mesh showed up. And I'm just wondering what else people see as, what did mesh add to the world of collaboration that wasn't there the day before mesh?
So I would say it's fair to say that there are other alternatives to mesh in the marketplace, right? So and there are many of the big players going into. I would say one of the interesting cases or alternatives to mesh is what Niantic is doing as the AR cloud, right? Is they're competing, becoming this platform where all of this activity happen. Niantic is probably going in the gaming space, multiplayer gaming, definitely with Pokemon Go, and take it from there, right? The rest is history. And Microsoft is playing to the enterprise, right? So it's definitely the hosting, the corporate assets and the information that goes there. What Microsoft is well known versus someone like Niantic will go. The capability itself, again, is the multi-user is an element critical of the being simulation in VR on your own. Yeah, you can go into VR and do your training yourself. It's not the same when you have now a human being, or a feeling a human being next to you, be able to demonstrate what to do. Is, I guess, computer-based training versus tutoring, if I have to put it in some way. The having the person next to you showing in a human-like way in a demonstration is different cognitive processes, right? They get activated, and it's difficult to compare. So that's ability, I think, that mesh brings about. Again, is not the only platform that brings it. Is multiple players are getting into that space, but that coexistence is the ability to see many people next to you and have human to human like communication, human body language. We talk about the ability to, in the near future, to show facial expressions in the avatars as well, right? So the enrichment of the communication, the human-human interaction, is what a platform like this enables.
The other interesting thing about Microsoft's ecosystem that I think eventually will be playing a role here is that they have the Kinect cameras that have typically been used for gaming, but now we're seeing more and more companies actually start to use several Kinect cameras to create kind of a mini volumetric scan of a person and then start to broadcast that live. And so we're still in the very, very early stages of that, but that, once they're able to really bring that technology and their volumetric capture studios, which is how they were able to get the kind of the avatar or the hologram version of Alex Kipman into the Ignite conference. Once that starts to become more popular, or that becomes more democratized with something like a Kinect camera, then we'll all be able to kind of scan a version of ourselves and then maybe even broadcast that live into a VR environment, which is really going to be even more game changing for what we can do creatively.
Yeah, one more thing to add to this, what I'm kind of hearing, thinking from an enterprise standpoint, right? What has mesh sort of, alerted everybody to, right? Part of it is the idea of, in the end, what's this all about? The hardware, the technology is now allowing us to sort of fabricate and create new experiences, right? Or different ways to sort of create a collaborative environment where people are enjoying the sort of the flow of the experience, right? Kind of at the higher level, when you look at the enterprise, right? People utilize technology based on how they feel and how they, what sort of personal reward they get when they use it, right? So when you look at a product like Mesh or Spatial or, the other sort of products out there that are equivalent, right? Part of it is it's the experience of collaborative learning that, is really kind of becoming very interesting, because now we're finding, for example, in the VR area, right? We now have a hardware that's not very costly, and it enables us to now be able to do these sort of, collaborative experiences together that, provides good value for trainers and, whatever the particular scenario is about. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and Mark, you mentioned Spatial, which is another leader. We'll post that in the chat too, but that's another leading platform in the space, and they do actually a lot of collaboration with Microsoft and others. And what's interesting about Spatial, and I think somebody mentioned this before, is just how they approach avatars. So for them, instead of having a, kind of like frame with the option of having your video next to your avatar, they actually kind of like Engage, they put the, your picture on top of the avatar. So I'm curious how everyone here thinks about that versus a more of a kind of a cartoon character versus maybe something more elaborate like we'll see in, VR chat or something. Just curious everyone's experiences, especially in the business world, which can be a little.
Well, there's a movement, or there was a movement up to this point, of bring your authentic self to work. And part of that movement gave people more freedom in how they showed up at work, and relaxed their dress codes or colored their hair or wore body jewelry. But there was a sense that was relaxing. You could show up a little bit more how you wanted to show up. So what I hear in the debate is, should avatars have a corporate dress code? And, we are big five, whatever, I won't blame the accounting firms or the consulting firms. And so there's a certain code that we show up on, or are we a company that wants to allow people more expression in how they show up? And sometimes people have tremendous creativity in showing up in avatar. And one of the biggest digital expenses in some of these online games is clothing, avatar clothing. And so do corporations want to open that door, and how are you going to put out some guidance on that, or how free and open are you going to be? But it's hard to reconcile with the bring your authentic self to work movement. So I'll put, that's my frame, is it's a Pandora's box right there when you put in corporate policies and avatars and how you want to dictate how people show up.
I mean, groups like Glue from Scandinavia, I mean, they've reduced it down just to pretty much the head, which is a sort of large cartoonish head, but based on an image, of an actual image of the individual, and then hands. So you don't have to deal with tracking or imagining what the rest of the body would be doing. And I think full body movement of avatars is going to, people are working on it, but it's certainly not there yet. But whether you go from literally sticking with something just like the head to the whole body, and then, obviously in a corporate event, their employees or their participants, and it's certainly at a college level, you're there in class. When you get into sort of younger groups of education, you actually have to anonymize them for privacy reasons. So then the issue of the avatar is actually something different. It's like what can represent them and give them a sense of an identity in the virtual space, but not to a third-party observer who doesn't know them. No, that's, you know, Jenny from 86th Street. I mean, so there are different considerations depending on the groups involved. And obviously it ranges from, I mean, the reason for school uniforms was exactly the issue Kevin was addressing in a broader sense. You want everyone focused on the subject matter. And if you get everyone worrying about the guy with the $10,000 Gucci suit, and there really was one, you know, then what, you know, that becomes a disruptive factor in the process, though not unlike some aspects of real life.
Yeah, it's interesting, Michael, because Gucci actually is, as you probably know, getting into the digital clothing space. So I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that you know, we will be seeing more and more digital first clothing in the business world.
There really was a $10,000 sale.
Oh, it was? Okay, it
Yeah.
was an actual. I know about like some of their, like the sneakers and accessories. I didn't realize. Yeah, and now you're touching upon the whole NFT realm, which is another can of worms. But yeah, and
if I might, let me just touch upon, if I would try to interpret your question from a different point, right? So is avatar has to be human-like, you know, realism versus more of the cartoonish comic presence. There's a good amount of research on the cognitive effects of realism in avatars. A human brain is very accurate at catching when things don't look right, and it brings the notion of the canny valley. Depending on so the answer is there is no one answer for all the cases. In some cases, getting character or cartoon-like is actually beneficial. I would make the metaphor what Michael was saying. You know, it's not distracting, right? So the $10,000 Gucci, it could be a distraction. Is, you know, a funny, scary looking, trying to pretend to be human but not quite human. It can be scary and detract from the tension. That's where the race for volumetric video and making realism is going. There is a significant amount of research and energy made on that. My view is, unless we're really good at it and make it really convey that, you know, passes that threshold, from practical uses in enterprise, we're better off actually using more mannequin kind of a character, a figurine, comic. In our use case, again, we're actually using a wood kind of character to represent the avatar. So we're taking gender, color, any kind of personal information and focusing on the physical movements, right? So again, to the question is, do we go into a realistic avatar, or we go into a cartoon? Not one single answer, depends on the situation. There is a lot of research to make it the threshold to cross that edge.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's got to be research, and I think it's very much tied to the intended use case. I mean, you can see like Engage is very much corporatizing the looks of their avatar dress. So now people look like they're from Man from U.N.C.L.E. episodes, and with black jackets and very thin ties. And it's entirely possible that people will spend their mornings and early afternoons online in, you know, avatars that look very, you know, sort of conventional, and then they'll hang out in VR chat at night looking like some kind of outrageous person, because in the real world they would have been night clubbing, but you don't do that anymore. You know, what can I say? I mean, that to me, VR chat is the sort of the nightclub extreme where people spend a tremendous amount of time on what they look like. And, you know, that's interesting, but certainly in terms of any kind of meeting where you care about not being trolled, I would not recommend VR chat as as a destination, but it's a great place to sort of hang out if you know of something that's going on there.
Oh, come on, Mike. Wearing the Red Fox avatar, walking around and, not being yourself, come on. No, I think to kind of answer the question for real, right? In an enterprise world, it's about it's going to be always a question of brand and level of professionalism, right? There's sort of that, like at UPS, lately we've had a lot of changes in the standpoint of tattoos, clothing, and things like that. Because it used to be at UPS, you wore brown, you wore a button-up shirt, you were, corporate, and that was that. But even in our sort of environment, it's the question also relates in avatars to the corporate culture, right? To your enterprise's culture. I think if you look at a very creative sort of enterprise, the argument would be, whatever, expression they want to have, they can, right? So the question is, if the avatar is an expression of self, right? The question is then, where should it go, right? If there was a question about legal proceedings, right? And the idea of sort of using VR to do collaborative sort of legal proceedings. I mean, my feeling right now would be, no, don't do it. Because depending on sort of what the legal process is that you're following, right? The aspect of sort of that personalization, the limits of the technology in regards to, checking someone's, physical tick because they're lying or something like that, right? The technology doesn't allow that yet. When it does, hey, maybe, it's ready. But in the most simplest form, right? What's the avatar? It's a symbolic, iconic representation of you in that virtual space, right? In enterprise, right, we're seeing the trend where they want to keep it very professional. They want to bring back the tie in IT, right? Because we got rid of it, and that's what they want to do. So, I think it boils down to what's culture, right? What's sort of the professional standard in the business sector that you're in that's going to dictate that. I'm all for going back to being your authentic self. But it's one of those things where with the introduction of technology, right, we always have new influences on where they want to see the technology go. So who knows? We'll see.
I think we are seeing at least some emerging signals of VR being used to kind of recreate crime scenes, or kind of like show people, kind of immerse people, in the world of what happened, to kind of give a more, visceral effect.
Recreations.
Yeah. So I think we're starting to see that, like the early beginnings of that, but yeah, it's probably too early to kind of have a whole, trial with a jury, in different places.
Yeah, that was kind of my interpretation too. Was what they mean by, right? I interpret it as literally doing a virtual court sort of.
Yeah,
scenario. I totally see right now. It makes total sense to do the whole sort of virtual, use data visualization to recreate crime scenes and stuff like that. That makes total sense. If you're talking about that makes total sense in the environment, right? I've heard stories about Boeing or Lockheed going, and when they have specific aircraft crash sites, right, they actually are using LiDAR scanners to actually scan the site, or trying to get the first responders to scan the site before they do anything, because they want to actually get sort of the data analysis of a physical crash site, right? One, for litigation later, and two, for actually, real sort of research and science. So data visualization in legal, 100%. But to do the collaborative legal, I'm like, I don't know. What do you guys think?
No.
Funny the conversation went that way. That's actually the origins of our company. We started with the forensic science and crime scene investigation as the main use case. It's fascinating the amount of technology, the sophisticated police departments, they do 3D scanning to do crime scene capture. This is sub-millimeter, really expensive scanners that you can recreate a bullet trajectory out of that 3D scan. Sadly, all of that information get reduced to two-dimensional artifacts that you can take in court. So, we see a court proceeding taken into remote meeting. I have to pay a parking ticket over Zoom. So I guess we are having courts. this kind of medium, and the more common they become, the more people will have, why not go in VR and, as you know, be in front of the judge there. Using the technology as a core proceeding, like, you know, demonstrating the rule of evidence coming to it, that's another panel. I'll be glad to tell you know, a good amount of implications that come with it. It is not a trivial matter, but it's really powerful and could be really promising.
And Mark, you mentioned LiDAR scanning before, and that's actually, I think, another really interesting development recently is that, you know, now with the new iPhones and the more advanced iPads, you can actually, pretty much anybody can create a 3D model of a space. I mean, it's still very, very early stages, so it's not, you know, extremely professional quality, but you're able now, especially if you do a very careful scan, to bring in to create basically 3D representations of whatever you have, like a room, or it could be an object, and you can then bring that into a virtual space, and then you can have, you know, a class or a meeting with that scan, you know, examining that scan, working through that scan, collaborating on that scan. I think somebody had a question about like 3D collaboration using 3D models, but I think what's exciting is that that's becoming democratized with kind of improving technologies on phones. We'll soon be able to get, I think, really good scans that we can import ourselves without having a huge volumetric studio like Microsoft does.
So I need to take advantage of that and get a kind of insert of our capabilities. Our platform actually has the ability to do that. We can take both the iPad LiDAR scanner and the iPhone, as well as the HoloLens, and create a real-time scanning of your worksite in a matter of seconds, right? So that gets recreated as a digital twin we compose. The ability to then have all that conversation with that information, that's I think is the key, is what we're trying to bring about. That technology is improving light speed, right? The precision of those scanners is improving, the precision of the sensors is improving. You know, many of those capabilities will go into the glasses, as the HoloLens has the ability. So even the scanning happening without human intervention, right? So kind of just there. So that ability to, again, capture a 3D space, recreate it. We have the ability to then create a simulation out of that space. So what we will do, create a classroom. So once we scan the worksite, that becomes a simulation space. People can practice procedures. They can play what if, which is one of the key elements, right? Especially if it's a dangerous kind of worksite. You don't want to mess around with an electric substation and make a mistake because it might actually explode. If you explode the digital copy of it, you know, you have a good laugh. So that ability to real time get the 3D data from the work sites and again do the scanning, that's opening a significant other door for the real time collaboration.
I can add something there too on the enterprise side. We've explored actually doing things where we would go to business clients and we would actually scan out their warehouse space, right? In the form of sort of a service to help optimize their warehousing and distribution services, right? So we really explored the 3D side of scanning it, but the problem we actually found was not the ability to scan it and present it, but to transform what we've scanned into something that's actually usable objects, so that this way you can kind of, you know, manipulate it. That's where right now I think is the challenge more so, right? To have it in collaboration is one thing, but also have the ability to have tools to easily sort of take that 3D scanned lift, right, out of that scanned environment and have it normalized, right? That's kind of, you know, there's still sort of explorations in there. And if we have any sort of Autodesk people or something like that, I'm sure they're gonna start chiming in. But either way, you know, that's kind of, it's an interesting opportunity, right? It's just, it's more of the flip side to it. Once we've scanned it, how can we manipulate it to make it more usable from an experience standpoint?
Very good, guys. I'm going to flip the topic a little bit because we're nearing on the end. We're actually a little over, but I do want us to discuss one more point. We want to talk about the $22 billion Microsoft contract with the US Army with HoloLens and what that impact is on the VR AR industry. Any of you guys could take that away.
I'll jump on this first. We have a good relationship with Microsoft, and seeing that sort of success for Microsoft really from a standpoint of an enterprise person trying to deploy technology, right? It sort of certifies that what they've been doing is going in the right direction, right? We know there's other companies in the space doing the same exact thing and competed for that, right? When you have something like a large organization like the Department of Defense to support indirectly, right, the advancements of that technology framework further, right, through their commitment to a company like Microsoft, right? That's very encouraging, right? I'll tend to also reference Mixed Reality Toolkit, which is a software that Microsoft provides, right? It's sort of the standard when you think about mixed reality applications because the quality and the capacity and the capability of what that software can do is where it is, right? And it's signifying. And then when you have a company like, the Department of Defense make a commitment like that, right? It says a lot. And for those of us that are in the industry, right, it really sort of confirms what, we're all sort of, being cheerleaders about.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, that makes it real, right? If we look at the history of Microsoft working in the space, is many years, right? So this is not a recent phenomenon. They have been working with the Department of Defense, pushing this and defining it, but this makes it real. If we put it in perspective, right, this one contract, the $22 billion that the Army, and this is at the Army, this is not the Department of Defense. I will elaborate a little bit more on that difference. Is bigger than the whole mixed reality industry a couple of years before, right? So it causes a ripple effect through the whole supply chain, the whole industry, the whole development platforms, hardware manufacturers, all the 9 yards. So this is going to accelerate the progress of the whole industry. If we look into the ability of this contract, again, this is the Department of Defense, is only the Army, Air Force, Navy, and there are different entities that have different relationship with Microsoft. The contract that we saw is for a version, a customized version developed for the Army. So it's not the same HoloLens that you and I can buy in the Microsoft store. That HoloLens is called the IBAS. It cannot be purchased. It's of course national security matter. The ability to make it mainstream, I think, is the main element. It makes it real. It's going from the proof of concept, a prototype, let me see this use case, let me see what I can measure here, I can kind of prove some value into, okay, now this is our day to day. And that will be a pivotal moment on this industry.
There's a whole host implication too. The Army is where a lot of young Americans go to build new skills. So if I'm a young American and I've joined the Army and I'm going to be in the Army for the next 3 to 5 years, and this is how I'm going to learn my skills and my tasks, and then I leave the Army 5, 6, 7 years from now, we're talking about a generation of workers that are going to enter into corporate America. I'm sure UPS hires a lot of former Army folks and other companies that have had rigorous multi-year training regime in VR. And that's going to hit corporate America in a few years. So there's that. It's not only what happens now, but it's what happens later, number one. And number two, the Army is in a very unique position of not having to be as concerned about the data privacy issues. If I tell you this is how you're going to learn this task, and I'm going to test and monitor if you're learning this task, if I can squeeze 5 or 10% out of your speed to competency on these tasks in the Army, massive savings for the Army there. in really testing and optimizing every way to squeeze a few percentage points out of the efficiency of upskilling, reskilling, new skilling people in a way that you can't do if I joined UPS, right? There's a certain amount of level where a UPS supervisor can command somebody to do things before that UPS supervisor is suggested to take a different route on his way home today.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, what you're talking about, I think more so, and it's a similarity that UPS has very much with the Army. And on certain automotive things, we probably share certain methodologies, is the fact that the military, any force, right, is very proceduralized in regards to how they train, right? And the technology of VR or MR, right, it's very effective when you have that level of proceduralized training. Because it goes back to my statement about why do we foster and utilize proceduralized training, right? It's because if it's proceduralized, you can accelerate it, right? It's a lot faster than sort of a mentorship sort of approach to it, right? And it's way less resource heavy, right? Because what's the military about, right? It's about scale. It's about, taking units and units of people and getting them to walk in the same row, do the same thing, so that this way everybody knows what to do, right? And looking back to what Microsoft's doing and other companies are doing, right? Immersive technology, VR, AR, is very effective at that exact type of training. So it goes back to, it's sort of an affirmation that, as an industry, we're going in the right direction. Great points, Kevin.
All right, I feel like that is a great place to leave it. You have all been so wonderful. Thank you for speaking. Thank you for listening. This has been a great time.
Pleasure, everybody.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, and start to experiment. There's a lot of options that we pasted in the chat. So take care.
Sometime we should have a panel in VR just to lead by example, right?
Absolutely.
Now it's just about everyone else accessing it.
All
Great.
right.
Take care.
Care,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.